Well, first of all, music is music. It sort of stands for music. And it may seem like a strange response, but that's what it is. It kind of defines itself. And it defines itself differently for people, for individuals. For me, it's a way of life. It's like music is defining what I'm doing with my life, how I'm spending my lifetime on planet Earth. And the role of music has changed over the years. So, like when I was a kid, it was sort of like a world to sort of like lose myself in, or just a place where I could experiment and discover new things. And even though that is still true, that's still the case nowadays, but since I've been sort of like working with and in music for such a long time, there's also this part of me that makes this kind of experience available to other people. So I have sort of, if I may say so, become music. So like music is, in that sense, also has become me. I am music. And that's like would have been like maybe the most direct and appropriate answer to your question. Like, I am music. It sounds, for some people may sound arrogant, but I actually do believe it. Like, I've become music by opening myself to music. And it really is the 40th anniversary of me becoming a musician, actually in this month. It was May 1983 when I went out and I bought music. Like, I spent my pocket money on music. Bought that record myself, and I sort of like committed to that relationship for life somehow. I didn't know that then, but I know it now. I mean, like, music was sort of present in the media, obviously, and my mother was listening to music when I was a child and also a young teenager. And so I was always somewhat exposed to music. My parents started taking me to music school when I was very small. And there's always been sort of like, even though it wasn't a musical family, but my parents, for some reason, they sort of had a hunch or an intuition that it was something good for me, or would be something good for me. So I was, listening to Beatles records and playing, like singing along with Hey Jude, and that's kind of like the thing that I remember from when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And when I was about 9 years old, my uncle, who was only 12 years older than I was, so he was in his early 20s, he had a record player. He lived in the same house. And so he invited me to his room and we listened to music together. My uncle, he was, he liked sort of experimental and instrumental music. And he played me, I remember Andreas Wollenweider and John Miles. Music was my first love. It's the song. And so I became kind of just a fan of music very, very quickly. Just like the experience of listening together. And just a few months later, my uncle and my mother, they went to a Mike Oldfield concert in Germany, in Essen, and they took me. And I had just turned 10, and that was really the turning point. That was the moment when I realized, okay, there's something there that really, really speaks to me. And it was already presented in the form that I then actually went for. So somebody like who makes the music doesn't only have to be the writer or the performer or the producer. You can be everything in one person, and that's what I've gone for. So that was at 10 years old, right? So then I kept going to music school, and I had some teachers, and like in my late teens I had a little, like my first band, which was called Oriental Foot Love. And then I had the opportunity to go study with Robert Fripp at a guitarcraft course, which took place in Switzerland. And again, I was lucky that my parents and my family supported me, and I could go there. And that was like, still, that wasn't even the beginning of my musical life, really. It was just funny, like, that I say that. It was only when I was 20 years old that I got my first Chapman stick. And that was the first time that I really started understanding that in order to make music in the way that I wanted, that I needed to study it in a way that is physical. So it's not just about like dreaming about it, or not just thinking about it, or not just putting fingers on some keys on a keyboard, something that's easy to do, but also to realize that the physical aspect of playing a guitar-like instrument was really important. And that's when I started studying, and learning about music properly. And it's been like 30 years now. When I was 18, I went to a guitarcraft course with Robert Fripp. And that was like the first time that I got exposed to a teacher, or instructor, as he sometimes calls himself, who was really teaching me and showing me that, like in order to become a musician, you need to develop a personal practice. So you need to like physically practice your musical instrument. And that was just something that was super foreign to me. Also, like other learning experiences that I had in school were more like, I was sort of talented, I guess that's the word that we could use. So I didn't need to study, right? I didn't need to study, but with a musical instrument, and especially like when I turned 20 and I first started playing the Chapman stick, which was such an alien thing to me, it was really impossible. So when I first picked it up, I knew I have to find ways to really study this in a disciplined way, in an organized way, so that I would have some sort of breakthrough actually making music with it. And so that's why I'm still saying that really my musical life, my real musical life, started at age 20, where I consciously decided, okay, I'm going to do this properly, and I'm going to develop a personal practice, and also develop my own methods, because at that time about the Chapman stick or touch instrument, there was not much material available, and even the people that could play a little, they didn't really know how to transfer the knowledge. So that's how I started, getting really into the deep end with music, also as a physical as well as a mental form of practicing. And that's I still do that. Like I'm still researching into the physical side of playing a lot. And when I say physical side, I mean like literally no music. So I've never practiced music in my whole life, which is really, I still find that astonishing that I get away with that. I only practice finger exercises, And I have I'm very lucky to be working with professional musicians where actually you don't really practice together, you just play together. So you get together, rehearsal basically just means play through the material once. There's no real back and forth or anything happening. I consider myself an improviser first anyway. So music just happens, and it's not something I have to learn before I play. So it was in around the year 2006 that I, became much aware of the fact that I didn't really have anything tangible that I was doing. Like at that time, music was already mostly digital and files, right? So like just not something you could take into your hands. Obviously, I was making CDs, and that was sort of like something that I could go and show my parents. For example, look at, I've made this CD, there's music on it, you can play it. Okay, but I realized there wasn't really something that encapsulated like the bigger idea. And so I got lucky that I had this idea to say, okay, I kind of asked myself, what do I have that nobody else has? And how can I turn that thing into an object rather than just keeping it as an idea? And it turned out that it was my knowledge and my experience with the playing technique of the touch instrument, which was the Chapman stick and the war guitar at that point. So I decided, okay, so what happens if I take my knowledge and I'm asking a great luthier to build an instrument with me that sort of, where the instrument sort of is built on the knowledge about the technique. And that's what the Touch Guitars U8 became, this instrument. It was funny because I went to Ed Reynolds, a luthier in Austin, Texas, and I told him, Ed, I'd really want an instrument that looks and functions and works totally like a traditional guitar. I don't want it to have anything special about it. I don't want anything to distract from the music. Things that happened, with the Chapman stick, for example, because it looks cool, has different form, and you kind of get distracted from the mere fact of that it's just a guitar-like instrument, right? And so I went to him with these ideas. I said, okay, it has to hang like this, and we need to make sure that the thin strings, they sound as loud and thick as the thick strings. And so I had a list of things I wanted to do. And we started building this instrument. And when I first held the prototype in my hand about 6 months later, I never looked back. I never went back to any other instrument. It was just so great to see that this concept, this idea of infusing a traditional guitar instrument, traditional design even, with all the detailed knowledge I had about the technique and how the instrument should be, that really made such a big difference. And one of the things that makes me most happy in my life is when I see people that start playing a U8, how they start making music right away. So where it's not that huge learning curve where you think that you have to dedicate your whole life to being able to play it, right? So what happened to me initially with the Chapman stick. The Touch Guitars has been going for almost, it's 15 years now, 15 or 16 years. And a few years ago I passed the business on to somebody else, so I'm not involved in the operations anymore. And it's my friend Stefan who runs the business now, and he's selling way more instruments than I ever have. So I'm very happy about that. And it's a constantly growing, a source of joy and a little bit of income, because people, they also come to me for lessons. And it's a wonderful thing. And I'm still sort of the main ambassador out there playing the instrument live on stages. You know that these things, they sort of teaching music and being a psychologist sort of happened at the same time, right? But having said that, so since in the early 90s, I was so determined to decode the playing technique. I also knew that it's not something that I always want to do just by myself, because if you have certain ideas, let's say, you need to test them with several people. So it's not just me playing an exercise and then realizing, oh, it works. I have to see it also work in other people or for other people. And so I think it was as early as 95 or 96 that I started working with a group of players in Spain. And I started visiting Spain, and we got together for a week or a weekend, and we worked together, and all of these elements came together that then eventually made the sort of the version 1 of my original school, let's say. Mm-hmm. And that has developed over the years. There was a gap of maybe 6 years or so, I guess between 99 and 2005, where I didn't teach that much. where I was concentrating on making music. Those were the centrozoon years. And in around 2005, I started meeting again with like German and Swiss players, and we started what is now and still called the Touch Guitar Circle. And the Touch Guitar Circle is the main vehicle to bring people close to the touch technique and sort of bring them into the circle of researchers, let's say. Like we're all sort of like, it's not that there's like one, obviously like I'm the main guy showing things, but it's really about like trying things out together and sharing the results of our work. So for the last 3 years now, I have been doing year-long courses, which are at a distance courses. So they use like modern technology, like message boards and video calls, and I'm sending out a weekly, sometimes less than weekly lesson for people to work with. But the idea is that we collectively, we find the results of our work, and then we kind of modify how we continue working with the material. And so over the years, which is now 30 years of me playing touch instruments, we've gotten to an amazing place where there's so much knowledge available that I think like what took me 15 years to learn, people can now learn in a year. And it's not that really was my aim to create something that is so efficient and time-saving, right? That was never the idea, but that's how it happened. And I'm sort of like trying to open up the Touch Guitar Circle even more so that there will be sort of like scholarships. So people can come in, they don't have to buy an instrument, they can get an instrument from me, like a little bit of rental thing. I haven't really started doing that yet, but it's the idea to bring young people in so that they can start fresh and they get like this really good instruction to bring this instrument forward more. So the interesting thing is that in the year that I started becoming a real musician, let's say, when I was 20 years old, I also started to study at university. And I studied psychology, not really kind of like ever really wanting to, or not knowing what I was going to do with it, really. Like I didn't study psychology because I knew what it was about. I studied it because I had a lot of question marks, not knowing what it really is. And I studied at Bielefeld University, which is sort of like based very much on the science of psychology. So, running experiments and like kind of understanding how you do research in psychology. And it wasn't really until like 3 years into the studies where anything that was like clinical psychology, like what most people think about psychology, what psychology is, started to actually be part of my education. And at that time, I then started to realize and just notice that somehow I had a talent for, sort of like being a teacher, let's just call it teacher or therapist. I never called myself therapist, and I still don't do that. I don't want to do that. Like the modern word that people use is like coach or coaching, and I'm also not totally agreeing with those terms, but I have to use them because everybody knows what it means. And so it was really in the mid-90s where I started to be also sort of like a source, let's say a source of inspiration for people, where people came to me to talk to me about their problems or certain questions and to get inspired and motivated. And I then also started even teaching officially at other universities, doing courses for team building and creativity and stuff like that. So I really went through a lot of you could say the basic education of what you kind of like need as a modern coach, let's say. But I never did it with the aim really to be a coach, because I knew I was going to be, and I always wanted to be a musician. So it was great because it sort of like grew on me this idea that I can also work with people in that regard over the years. And at the end of my studies at Bielefeld University, I had found a partner, and we started a little company where we're doing like business, like trainings for small companies. So people would book a weekend with us, and they would learn about the basics of communication and like how to formulate aims properly and stuff like that. So simple things, you know. But that was sort of like the professional, like the introduction to the professional side of working as a psychologist in organizations or in sort of the therapeutic contexts. So, you know, like the touch guitars teaching, like the research there, and this, what then became the coaching activity I'm doing now, like 20 years later, has sort of like grown hand in hand. So sort of like this idea that it's never just a one-sided process. It's not that like there's always a relationship, the relational aspect happening in any like learning situation, where it's about like personal change, like learning to play a piece of music. That is personal change, right? For example, and so these two elements have gone, you know, hand in hand for many years. And funnily enough, now a lot of people that I work with as a coach are also people that have music lessons with me sometimes, or people that like utilize me as a producer for the music. There's always that aspect of kind of like learning, but learning as a holistic experience. So it's not just about learning to play the instrument or learning how to mix a piece of music. It's learning how to listen, how to understand how your own state, your feelings kind of like influence how you are experiencing the world. You're experiencing a piece of music, for example. And so it's really something I could talk about for a long time. There are so many similarities, and I would even say it is the same. Like a good teacher, like if you think about like a cool school teacher, somebody teaching kids, they should also in a way see themselves as somebody who leads those people into life. It's not that just you teach them how to do mathematics or something, right? It's more about like learning about how to learn, about the learning experience, the learning process itself. And that's sort of like my, you know, like being in that field and doing my own work in that field sort of like has also led me to reevaluate a lot of what I have come across in my life as a child and as a young adult when it comes to, you know, learning experiences, you know. Yeah, I'm happy to have found this room here, which is just a 5-minute walk from where I live. And I love this idea to have just an empty cube, basically, just where I can do anything I want. And just to have a table that I can move anywhere, like my guitar can be there or over there. I have the camera here, I can film here. You know, it's all just in flux and can be moved around. I have my Rhodes there, which I'm planning to use on some recordings later this year, and it's just wonderful. And like there's like a big shop window over there in a beautiful part of town, and I couldn't be happier. And like sometimes I go here even at night for just an hour and a half to practice, or to do emails or something. And like I'm always, like most of the time, I'm in a creative mode anyway. I do things, and it's good to have like the quiet. I'm really one of those people who can't really work with many distractions, or even just people around that are thinking too much. Even I can sort of hear their thoughts. That's what it feels like. And so that's why I need this space where I can be alone and just kind of like also shut these curtains here, like I can do this and I can start working, I love it. I love it, really love it. Yeah, that symbol, that's the headman. It's a symbol that I found in a book about medieval symbols. So this is something that has been used like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it is not a little devil, as some people may think. It's a person in shackles because of the thoughts. Like this here, this represents the thoughts. Like too much thinking means you cannot move. You're kind of like, you know, restricted. And it has become my logo a long time ago. On my first album, which was released in early '98, I've already used this logo, and I still use it. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful symbol for what human beings are like. And I consider myself to be like that, but also as somebody who has kind of like found a way to move away from that. And also, you know, I also like passing that, you know, that ability on to other people. So I think like there are many things I've learned over the years. And I think it kind of comes down to that you are always a complete perfect person. You're always, you don't have to learn something to play music, let's say. You don't have to do anything to improvise. You are already who you are. You can already do what you do. You have always all the freedom, let's say, to do anything you want in a way. Just sort of like on a psychological level, I mean, right? So the culturally, like the cultures that I'm like operating in, there are certain narratives that people are hearing, that you need to be able to do this, and if you can do this, then you can do that, blah blah blah. So all these if-then kind of chains of thoughts. And I think like what I've learned is that is only marginally true. You can always do something. You can always act. There's always a way to kind of like actually become active. And so that's why like if I'm working and if I'm meeting other people, or if I'm meeting myself, I see both that. I see the person that is perfect right now, and I also still see the potential. I see both, right? But the potential is also always realized now. It is realized right now, not sometime in the future. It's now, and it's that flow of things, that how things are in flux, that I'm perfect now, and I'll be, you know, as perfect tomorrow as I'm now. But I can sort of like commit to sort of like the process of, say, acquiring some sort of skill or some knowledge or some freedom in my life to act differently, to act more kindly with other people, to be more loving, to be more accepting, you know? Like this is always something that I can sort of like look forward to as sort of a result of the process, but the process is now. It is now. It's always the presence in the present is what matters, you know? And so that's sort of like what I've learned. And it also means that like I have come to see in people and situations around me like the limiting factors. You know, I see how like the psychology of some people really holds them back, or makes them being sort of like their own worst enemy in a way. And like if there's anything that I do want to contribute here in this world, is to give like opportunities for people to experience themselves as perfect in the moment, like where they can relax, they can feel released in a way, if that makes any sense, to just experience the beauty of the moment and to experience their own perfection. And I do that, I do that, and I hope I do that in like direct interaction with people, but also through my music. I hope that my music gives people the experience of beauty and perfection. It's sort of like related to the being in the present. So like this idea of home or feeling at home really comes down to like being at ease, like with oneself in sort of like any moment, right? And it's not really tied to any particular location. There are locations that sort of like remind oneself of a past feeling, let's say, right? And I call it past because, yeah, it is in the past, because you get reminded of it, which means it is something that had happened before, so you recognize it. So it's sort of like the feeling of home kind of like arises when you start recognizing yourself, when you recognize yourself in the present moment. That is home. Home is not a place. You know, home is recognizing yourself. And that is, I guess, it's not easy. It's like the place, where does home reside? You know, where does it live? Does it live anywhere? It lives in life. It lives in yourself. It is life itself. Life itself can be home. If you feel at home with life, that's probably like what we all would like eventually, to feel home, being alive. And you know, there's like one spiritual teacher I met at some point who said to me, and I asked him something, I can't even remember what it was, and he said to me, "Markus, you know what? There is life before death."